All right, welcome to episode 553. We are going to have a Papuan carpet roundtable. With us, we have Nick Mutton. He is, everybody knows who Nick is that's into carpets. He's from Inland Reptiles and the author of the more complete carpet python. We have Riley Jimison from Riley's Reptiles and Ben Nickelson from Nickelson Herpetoculture. We're going full nerd on this episode, so get ready. I would like to let everybody know that we share pics throughout the episode. So if you want to check that part out, you want to see that part, we share the video over on Patreon. So if you're interested, go check that out. The links are down below. But for people that may be their first time tuning in, let's go around. So we're gonna always go when we're answering questions or topics. So we'll go Nick, Riley, Ben, me. I'll ask the question and then you can go. We'll just start by saying a brief introduction of yourself and what got you and what do you love about Papuan carpet pythons? Start with you, Nick.
They were, I guess, the second carpet python I ever got, but I was just getting into the hobby around the time the first ones were being imported. So that was kind of the hot new thing for a minute there. And so I kind of got swept up in that very early on. Even got my first, giant wild caught adults way back in the mid 90s myself. So it was just kind of there right as it was coming about, and just kind of rode the wave the rest of the time this last 30 years.
Okay, cool. What about you, Riley? I think you're muted.
Oh, yep, there we go. Papuans, Papuans I found after I kind of started dabbling with jungles and coastals a little bit, and then found NPR, and your enthusiasm for them totally cued my interest, and I linked up with Dan Mallory, started grabbing a bunch of his imports and going down that rabbit hole, and a few dozen of those later, I've definitely found a fondness for them, and they are a large staple of the population of animals I work with today.
Cool. What about you, Ben?
So I started with jungles way back when, and found Papuans along the way. Always appreciated them. And then, I got out of it for a long, long time and then came back into it. And all the jungles were amazing. And I was amazed that there wasn't as much refinement with the Papuans. So I'm super excited about the possibilities with them. And they're not saying there hasn't been some refinement, but in general, every single jungle is a slammer, and there's a lot of different ways you could take Papuans, and it just doesn't seem to be going there yet.
Yeah, I think, they were really my first real big carpet purchase. I've been banging that drum since 2011 on NPR. I'm glad Riley listened. That was good. And I think that there's so much potential there that's untapped. I guess Nick's influence on me as well is sort of, jungles have been yellowed and black to death. You need to go a different direction if you can sort of, I guess, work some of the projects like Papuan carpets or even inlands or something like that you could probably really make some really killer stuff. There's so many directions too with Papuans, which we'll get into, but okay.
Yeah, there's so many colors.
yeah 100%. Well, I guess we'll just be quiet while Nick talks this whole part, but
no pressure.
When it comes to taxonomy, so we always have this question. Everybody's, it's kind of a joke, and everybody kind of jokes around. It's all in good fun, but it's like, what do we call them? So they used to be called IJs, Irian carpet pythons forever. Then they sort of became West Papuan carpets. Some people call them Papuan carpets. I think that there was some people debating because it's confusing with the Papuan python and blah, blah, blah. So there's been taxonomy change as well. So I don't know. What do we call them, Nick?
Papuan carpet pythons.
Okay, easy done.
You know,
All right, next question.
I don't want to seem like I realize I look like a curmudgeonly old man now, and perhaps I am, but if you can't tell the difference between a Papuan carpet python and a Papuan python, I can't help you. Like,
Amen.
If you can't tell those two, if you can conflate and confuse those two things, then you should probably, I don't know, get into something else and not into pythons, because that's kind of an absurd thing. So yeah, Papuan carpets. The original moniker of Irian carpets was actually wrong before it ever, I mean, basically what happened with that is these animals came in from the area formerly known as Irian that was already no longer Irian when the first snakes came in. So by the time the first animals landed, that was already not a place that even existed. It was never a right name, but like a lot of things in herpetoculture and even in science more generally, bad nomenclature sometimes sticks, and people are very reluctant to let it go. But that's a place that is the former name of a province of Indonesia that has not existed in decades. If you can find a modern map that shows me where Irian is, then I guess you can call them that, but you can't do that. The entire island, both sides of it, snakes don't recognize political boundaries and imaginary lines that people draw on maps when they steal half of an island in the 1950s. As in Indonesia, I'm looking at you. The snakes are on both sides of the political boundary. They don't understand the difference between those two things. The whole island is called Papua. The people on both sides are called Papuans. It is a Papuan carpet python. So that's a name that will always be correct. They can change the name of that province as many times as they want. Papuan carpets still will hold up. So that's why I go with that.
I agree. Okay. What about taxonomy wise? Where do they fall?
This is one of those, we live in a time where everybody wants a neat, concise, clear, super brief, short attention span sort of answer. And this is actually vastly more complicated than that. They are in the variegata complex, but what we call variegata has 3 different populations that can vary a fair bit from each other, and both phenotypically and genetically. The closest relative of Papuan carpets, unsurprisingly, are the carpets on the Cape York Peninsula of Australia, but those and also are allied with the ones in the top end that we call Darwin carpets. If you look at them phylogenetically, you'll find there's virtually no difference between a Cape York carpet and a New Guinea carpet, regardless of what they look like. And defining Cape York carpet is basically from gelatin, including gelatin, north all the way to the tip of the Cape, and including New Guinea. It's basically one unit genetically. So as much as I love my gelatin carpets, so I didn't call them gelatin jungles anymore. And I know you love yours too.
I do.
There's virtually no daylight genetically between those weird black and white and gray gelatin jungles and a Papuan carpet. They are genetically the same thing. And the reason for that is pretty clear. That is, you could walk from the tip of the Cape York Peninsula, Australia to New Guinea 6,000 or 7,000 years ago without getting your feet wet. And there's islands in between that area, and there are carpets on those islands as well. So they have not been separated long enough for any genetic drift to have occurred, or for any of them to sort of wandered off on any sort of a genetic tangent. It just hasn't been long enough for that to have occurred. That's not quite the case with the third population in the top end, what the hobby refers to as Darwin carpets. Those are genetically a little bit different, but not different enough to warrant a separate taxonomic designation. If you look at the map that you've got pulled up now that shows, that is the continent of Sahul, which is basically Greater Australia. What most people in the hobby and in the world probably don't really realize is that New Guinea is not really an island above Australia. It is part of Australia, and the low-lying areas in the middle are periodically inundated with water during times of interglacial, warmer, wetter interglacial periods. Throughout most of the last 2.5 million years, this is what it looked like. A relative minority of the time is what it looks like now, at times of higher sea level that cuts these two populations off. So this is basically the norm. And as you can see, when I did that map, I even corrected it for vegetation patterns based on some research and stuff, and soil sediment cores and whatnot. And so the area in between that's now underwater between southern New Guinea and northern Australia was almost entirely dominated by eucalyptus savanna, which is the prime habitat for carpet pythons. So it would have a very, very hospitable submerged bit of climate, or habitat rather, that connected those two land masses. If you look to the west side, where you see where Aru is, right under the base of the Bird's Head Peninsula there, and you'll see that little indentation, and then to the east of that, to the right, you'll see a freshwater lake or a brackish lake. That is Lake Carpentaria, which at times of low sea level is a brackish lake, and in times of high sea level now, it's the Gulf of Carpentaria. It's inundated with seawater. At this time, basically, I'm trying to it's just a lot of complicated stuff. I'm trying to distill it down into something people can understand, I guess, easily enough. But as sea level rises up, as glacial ice sheets in the northern hemisphere, and to a lesser extent southern hemisphere, as those retreat and that water melts and dilutes ocean water, sea level comes up. The difference between this map and at present is about 400 feet. Sea level's 400 feet lower at this point, just 20,000 years ago. As the sea level comes up, as those glaciers retreat, this is a process that takes thousands of years. The seawater, the marine inundation that cuts off New Guinea from the rest of Australia starts in the west, where Aru is and all that. So the Aru Islands are the first bit of that conjoined landmass of Sahul that gets separated. And then it keeps creeping in, because that area is very low lying. It creeps in until eventually ocean water floods in and floods the Carpentaria Basin. Lake Carpentaria becomes the Gulf of Carpentaria. And that mostly severs New Guinea from Australia. That happens. It takes a considerable amount of greater time for it to completely sever the connection between Cape York and the southernmost bit of New Guinea. So that what happens is the carpet pythons in the top end, the Darwin carpets, while this is all one contiguous population, presumably, that's interbreeding and exchanging genes, they're the first to get cut off. They get cut off much earlier with the marine inundation of the Carpentaria Basin, but connectivity and gene flow persists between New Guinea and Cape York for a much longer time period before it's finally severed. And this is why, this is reflected when you look at their genes, you see that all of these things are pretty closely related, or very closely related, but you can see that there's a little bit more distinction between the Northern Territory stuff, i.e. Darwin carpets, because they've been separated for longer, and that shows in their genes. And curiously, it shows not just in their genes, it shows in the genes of a lot of things. If you look at the water pythons of New Guinea, Queensland, and Northern Territory, what you'll find is a huge difference genetically between the Northern Territory and the Queensland water pythons. They all look the same, but they're vastly different genetically. And there's no difference between the New Guinea and the Queensland ones. That's the same snake, but the Northern Territory ones are different, just as we see in the carpet pythons. If you look at the frilled dragons that show the same situation, Northern Territory is different. Queensland and New Guinea are the same. So you see this same pattern, biogeographical pattern, and other things that share this same three-way distribution pattern. So hopefully that made some sense.
Yeah, for sure. Is it crazy to think, I know, say 50,000 years from now, if the world is still around, would Papuan carpets be on their own trajectory to sort of branch off and become their own species? Is that crazy to think that way, or?
No, but if you could magically factor human activity out and the effects that we have on climate and warming the planet up, basically, I get so nerdy and it gets down in the weeds and I don't want to lose people, but the cycle of ice ages and interglacials never ended. We think the ice age is not over. We are still in that. We are just in a warm, wet interglacial period. We are at the point where, another handful of thousands of years, the climate should start tipping back into another glaciation, in which case we return to this map and all those populations will be allowed to come back together and trade genes again. Okay. However, that we have likely as humans have likely broken that cycle. The natural cycle of ice ages and interglacials is governed by something called the Milankovitch cycle, which is really complicated. It has a lot to do with the precessional rotation of the Earth's axis and the elliptical orbit of the Earth around the sun, and how when those things sync up, it creates these longer term cycles of climate. But we are affecting that at a much higher rate than any natural phenomenon. I mean, the difference between a glacial and interglacial, between having glaciers in the northern hemisphere and low sea levels and where we're at now is literally only about 2 degrees. That's it. It's a difference of about 2 degrees.
Wow.
That's the difference. So you're not talking about massive swings in temperature. It gets more exaggerated when you get closer to the poles. At the equator, animals would barely notice, but it doesn't take much to tip you one way or the other.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Yeah. I warned him we were going full nerd.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I like learning that kind of stuff, but okay. So do you guys, what do you call them, Riley? You call them Papuan carpets, right?
Yeah. I mean, when I came into it, I was taught IJs and it rolled off the tongue, but very quickly learned Papuan carpet was probably a little bit more of an accurate terminology. And so ever since I figured that out, that's just where I've stuck.
Yeah. You too, Ben? You're muted too.
Sure. I've always called them Papuan carpets.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right. I don't know. What do you guys think as far as like, does a common name even matter? Does that even matter? Is that important? It kind of, I don't know. What do you think, Nick?
Well, I'm a grumpy old man, so I think it matters, but
I'm with you.
I get not obsessed, but I get like there's certain things that just bug me that people like seize on like outdated terminology and things that are just blatantly incorrect and they won't let it go. And it's, so whether it's, Papuan carpets or versus IJs, this sort of thing. I mean, and there's historical examples of this. I mean, we're still stuck with the Antaresia perthensis for a species that was misidentified and doesn't occur anywhere near Perth, but nobody changed it. And so we're stuck with it. We're stuck with Python timorensis that doesn't occur on Timor.
Right.
At all. It's like we're stuck with that. We're stuck with a huge classification of living dinosaurs, which are part of the theropod dinosaurs, which are still alive in the form of every bird on the earth. And the name theropod is wrong. They got it backwards. They mixed up. It means beast foot and one means bird foot, and they got it backwards. So what we are calling like sauropod means a lizard foot actually has beast feet, and what we're calling but it's stuck, and 150 years later we're stuck with it forever. So it's not too late to change these things.
Right.
My previous crusade was to quit using the word codom. That's not a thing.
I think we broke that. I think that's thing. You think? Well, maybe in like the ball python world, it's still a thing, right? Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. I don't.
Maddening. It's like I can't take you seriously if you use the word codom. That's not how inheritance works. That is just one person's misunderstanding of something they read that is just stuck for 20 years now. We're stuck with.
I remember years ago, I was talking to this guy I worked with. He went to college for genetics. How he ended up running a supermarket, I have no idea, but that's another topic. Anyway, I'm explaining to him like codominant, and he's like, that's wrong. It's incomplete dominant. And I'm arguing with him like, no, man, I know. I'm telling you. I listened to it on Reptile Radio. It's codominant. He's like, no, that's not right.
Now, if we could just abolish the term super, it's like I have a fair number of an unusually high number of friends that are geneticists, and I know they must just die inside every time they hear that a little bit. Like, it's a super. It's like, no.
Herpetoculture. Gotta love
other terms like, it's a het trait. A het trait? What? Like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't think it's too hard to insist on using the correct terminology.
No. What do you guys think, Riley? You have any thoughts, Ben? Anything?
Oh, I agree, man. I side with Nick on all of that stuff. Once I hear what is a correct term, I can't unhear that. And from that point on, if I hear the incorrect term, just a little part of me dies inside. Whether I, feel it's appropriate to say anything or not is a different story, but I hear it and I pay attention. And whether it's conscious or not, man, it just, when you're using correct terms like that, I can't help but look at you kind of like a little bit like a dumbass. And I don't mean to be so judgmental, but like, man, it just, if you're breeding animals and you're selling them, I feel like it's your duty to be as educated as possible. And this willful ignorance of like using incorrect terminology to run with the crowd is just, it's silly.
I'd also like to name and shame anybody that's ever referred to a Brendel's python.
Oh, yeah.
Or a Stimpson's python with a P.
Yeah.
I'm coming for you guys next.
Nice. I don't know. Did you have any thoughts, Ben, that you wanted to add, or you're following with Riley and me?
Well, I mean, I'd say like common names. It doesn't really matter what you call them, but it's confusing to people that are coming into the hobby and they're like, you know, what difference between an IJ and a Papuan carpet, and you have to explain they're the same thing. You know, right. Papuan is the correct term, but
right,
you know, people are going to say what they're going to say, and you just got to educate people and be nice.
Well, I found that I don't know. I guess in the Morelia world, maybe NPR has a little bit of influence, and like that's why I like to ask these questions that seem like, why are they talking about names and blah blah, so that people can listen at the very beginning and have an understanding of, like, you know, to Riley's point, if you're learning about them, you should know the right names and stuff like that. And you know, sometimes it's hard to find. I mean, there have been 2 books written about them, and you know, podcasts for 13 years, and you know, YouTube channel with Riley on there yelling at you every week about Papuan carpets and stuff. So you got me yelling, Riley yelling, Nick yelling. What more do we got to do? Come on. All right. So I thought, for a husbandry topic, I thought it would be interesting to get your guys' thoughts on having wild carpets and establishing them, since Papuan carpets are really the only wild carpet that we can put our hands on. You know, I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about, you know, what you did, some of the issues that you ran into, or just experiences in general. What do you got, Nick?
I was going to defer this to the other guys a bit and let them talk a bit, since I don't want to totally monopolize the conversation. But
go ahead. You want him to go? Riley can go.
Yeah, Riley can have this one.
All right. Wild caughts have been surprisingly easy to acclimate into my system of care. They're not difficult husbandry wise. I mean, I will say a lot of the times they do like to soak right off the bat when they come in. They do like that humidity, and up here in Sacramento, it's a little drier, so I have to put in a little more effort running humidifiers and things. But yeah, I mean, they're usually pretty hardy. They're pretty friendly and tolerable in my opinion. And they eat kind of right off the bat, whether you give them rats or birds. I really haven't had too much trouble with any, whether it be wild caught or farm hatched imports or whatever. But yeah, I mean, they've been great, especially compared to, like captive hatch ones. They're just little jerks, but
yeah, man.
Yeah.
Those F1s. Holy shit.
Yeah. I have wild caught animals that are just sweethearts. And then everything that I hatch out just appears to have a chainsaw in its lineage somewhere. So.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. Okay, so have you had any of them that came in that they waited for feed or anything like that? I had one go a while. That's kind of why I'm asking that. Have you had any kind of situations with that? And did you just wait it out? No?
Not really. I mean, I would never offer them right away. I'd kind of set them up in something, just let them be for a week or two and just not really mess with them other than change their water. And if they didn't, take frozen thawed right away, which most of them do in my experience, I'd just toss a live in there overnight and it'd be gone. But I haven't really run into too many issues with them.
Okay. Do you do anything different setup wise? Why they're,
I mean, when they first come in, I definitely want to keep them really like clean and easy to observe just for quarantine purposes. I haven't had any issues with external parasites or anything like that. haven't had any of those like subcutaneous parasites that you see in like chondros or anything. So, you know, they come in pretty robust in my opinion. I mean, I don't just get them from like random jobbers or importers, but I tend to go through people who I know have a solid reputation in what they're doing. So I'm sure, doing that probably cuts out a lot of the hassle on my end. But yeah, I haven't really run into like, ticks or mites or any, crazy war wounds or anything like that on them. So
Yeah, I guess that does make a difference, right? Most of my stuff came from Dan Maleri.
Yeah.
And, he's doing a good job at, cleaning them up, if you will, getting them going and whatnot. So, okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Ben? Have you had any experience with wild animals yet?
No, I haven't gotten any wild caughts. Gotten most of my stuff from Nick, actually. So,
there you go.
Perfect.
Good call.
One thing that's worth mentioning is the description of how your wild caughts have done. That's not always been the case at all. There's 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, when the first ones came in, I got quite a number of wild ones, and the importation process and how those animals are handled and their ordeal in getting from New Guinea to get here is pretty different now, and it's all for the better. So wild caughts now do a lot better. The ones back in the early days were horrible snakes. They weren't really aggressive so much. That's a wild caught female from the early days. And that snake came in at a solid 5.5, 6 feet and never ate a rat its entire life. Fed it entirely nothing but hamsters and chickens.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It laid 33 eggs at one point. I mean, I got a pair of huge wild caughts that I got them to breed, but very early on in the 90s. But they were a lot of the wild caughts. They'd be super shy, not really aggressive, but they would be really hard to get feeding, and they'd stress really easily. They'd come in really dehydrated. They would have I've seen all manner of parasites. You'd have to worm them, and they would crap out like live worms would come out. And it's like, it's a lot better now. Like,
okay.
A lot better now. I think the process of importation is they take a bit more care to do, with the animals themselves. And then you get guys like Dan that get them and kind of fix them up, and you don't see nearly as much, losses in terms of wild caught stuff as you used to. So, and that's all a good thing.
Okay. What was talk to us, Nick, about like what it was like when they first came in back then. Like, was it like, were people like trying to get them? Did they care about them? Did nobody care about them?
Oh yeah. No, they were fairly expensive for the time. I mean, I remember VPI back in the day was one of the first. They might have been the first people to breed them, and so if not the first, they were among the very first to breed them. And they were like $800 snakes, but that's $1995. Like that's, that's a lot. It was one of the last really new pythons to kind of come into the hobby, and so there was but it sort of fizzled relatively quickly. It was like there was big demand initially, but it didn't last for a sustained period. They lay a fair number of eggs. They're not very hard to breed, especially when you get your F1s. They breed fairly readily and everything. So the price came down on them fairly early on, and then people went right back to worried about yellow jungle carpets again, mostly. And so they've kind of been on everybody's back burner for 3 decades.
Yeah.
And while you see some work with selective breeding, it's usually just 1 or 2 people, and it usually doesn't last for, I mean, speaking only for myself as someone who's selectively bred things for, some lines for almost 30 years, just as an individual, to get somewhere, you need to have a singular focus, and it's going to take a while. And it seems like everybody's attention span in the hobby now is on mutants and morphs, which are basically shortcuts, because we don't want to take 5 generations to selectively breed something cool. We want instant gratification. And so the very nature of selective breeding, it's just a longer process, and people do not have the patience for it nearly as much as they used to. They're spoiled. Why would I want to selectively breed for a lighter, brighter one, and I'll just get a hypo or something like that, and I'll just get everything I want without having to put in the work that a selective breeding project, over a longer term will take. But personally, I think that's the most rewarding thing, is when you can look at, you produce some exceptional animal and you can look back and it's like, I produced that animal. I produced that animal's parents, its grandparents, its great grandparents, its great 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 grandparents. And you can see all that progression over time. That to me is the most rewarding thing, I guess, when you can look back at, multi-generation projects and you put the sweat and the hard work and the time in to get there. And that's more rewarding to me anyway.
I agree. And if you're sort of like looking, sort of what I was saying earlier, if you're looking to sort of, make a name for yourself, if you will, I guess, in the carpet python world, it's kind of hard to do that with jungle since everybody's done that. But here's like, a palette for the taking. You just got to put in the work. And I think the thing with selective breeding has always been that you kind of are at the front of that, whatever the project you're working with, whether it's banded animals, striped animals, high yellow, high, black animals, or whatever it would be, you're sort of shaping your own destiny, if you will, I guess you would say. But okay. I know earlier we talked about the whole water bowl thing. What do you guys think that is? What is it with Papuan carpets and wanting to soak in their water bowls? I don't know. Ben, do you experience that with yours?
Actually, I haven't. When I had them before, back in the day, I had 3 or 4 that would do it all the time. But the group that I have now, none of them do it.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure. I'm keeping them the same way.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure what the difference is.
We get into a little bit of, there's been basically no field work done in southern New Guinea with carpet pythons per se. So whatever you find, any natural history information, it's usually somebody that was studying some other thing and then observed this other thing as kind of an aside, not a lot of direct research. But, with a little bit of hesitation and getting into a bit of idle speculation, it is, in my opinion, quite likely. The habitat that they live in they do not live in a closed canopy rainforest environment. They live in a eucalypt savanna that looks like top end of Australia, unsurprisingly. And where you find them is in the savanna and in the transition zone to the rainforest, but not in the rainforest. And that area, that savanna, is much like, it's kind of like the Everglades. It's like the top end of Australia, where it's really dry and everything's brown, and then it greens up in a wet season and you get billabongs and this sort of stuff. So you have a seasonal wetland area that's seasonally very wet, but other times of year is not. So if you live in an area that's prone to flooding and standing water on the ground for months at a time, having a predilection for sitting in water makes a little bit more sense. It's also probably a pretty effective way to hide from predators if you're a juvenile carpet python.
Sure.
So I've noticed forever they dry. I guess most of the Papuans I have now are animals that I've, that are probably 4 and 5 generations removed from their wild ancestors. So perhaps these instincts are getting a little bit lessened. But in the early days, when you were at F1 or F2, it was more prevalent. It would drive you nuts because it was hard to even get a good picture of babies sometimes because they'd have hard water spots on them.
Yes.
Because they get water crust. It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
They'd always be sitting there in their water. But and I'm kind of an asshole, I guess, but I don't give them a big enough water bowl to sit in because I don't want them doing that.
Right.
The hatchlings get like a 2-ounce portion cup. That's your water bowl. And I guess you can try and get a lot of your body in it if you're really committed to it. But I'm sure if I gave them like a big, 12-ounce water bowl or something, they'd all just sit in it. I do that because I don't want them sitting in it. They can lead to skin problems. Yeah. Also, if you're an animal that just crapping on the floor in your enclosure, you've got traces of your own fecal matter on you. You don't notice it on a normally pigmented snake. But if that snake sits in a water bowl, and then whatever's on its skin is sitting there in like an 80-degree room, like 80-degree water that's not circulating or moving with poo in it. Like that's a petri dish for every kind of, that's not sanitary. I mean, snakes don't live in sanitary conditions in the wild, but I don't want them sitting in gross water. That can't possibly be good. So I try to discourage that.
Gotcha. Okay. Agreed. All right. Well, I guess we can move into breeding and we can sort of talk about, again, going back to the topic of, we can import these, like, let's talk about because I've never heard people talk about this. We haven't talked about it. Like what constitutes a good group of, if you wanted to have your own bloodlines or lines or outcrossing? What's your thoughts? You want to go first, Nick?
As far as with any Python project, in carpets in particular, since I do a lot of that, to me, like a 2.2 or 3.3 is like a 2.3 or a 3.3 is an ideal group. 2.3 works really well. If you have a single pair of something, that can work out really great as long as everything goes perfect and everybody breeds and nobody ever dies and nothing ever bad ever happens. It can be fine. But that's not how the world works. And we've all been in the hobby all of us have been in the hobby long enough. It's like, not every male's a good breeder. Not every female's a good layer. Sometimes snakes die. Things happen. And if you only have a single pair and so any one of those things happen, you have nothing. You don't have a project because you're left with one snake. If you have 2.2, 2.3 and one male doesn't breed, guess what? You've got a backup male. You can fight those males together and combat them to motivate them to breed, increasing the likelihood the males are going to do anything. If a female lays bad eggs chronically, you've got two others. You can breed two pairs every year and rotate the females, give them every third year off and produce 2 clutches a year ad infinitum forever, and still rotating them in and giving them a rest year. So that's a good group. 3.3 is even better. So that's what I try to do with every project that is important to me. 2.2 or 2.3, typically.
Oh, I was gonna say what? Sorry, I was muted now. What the heck? I must be new to this. What do you say, Riley? You have a pretty big group of wild and captive hatched and all that. What was your?
Yeah, I second what Nick is saying. I've made the mistake of only getting 1.2, and I only have I think I only have the male from that 1.2 remaining, and yeah, it's just anything can happen. Freak accidents, animal gets sick. I had a female, a striped imported female, randomly just one day I was checking on her and literally looked like her back was broken. No idea how it happened. You can lose animals in the breeding process even if nothing goes wrong and get them up to that breeding finish line. I've had that happen too, plenty of times. Actually, the last 3 years I had it happen each year. So I think for any project, even outside of just Papuans and carpets, 2.2 is a minimum. 3.3 is a little more comfortable. Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Ben?
So I'll just speak from what I've been doing, because I've only been back doing this for like the last 2-3 years, but I've been building a group like with 3 different projects in mind, but I have like moving parts that can kind of work in each project. So I'm sitting at 2.5 right now, and I'm looking for maybe 1 or 2 more males that can kind of fill in where other ones might not quite work. So that's kind of what I've been doing. Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, so a couple of things come to mind, like, when you buy wild carpets, let's say from Dan that were captive hatched, I guess he would tell you this. I've never asked because I've never asked him directly, but maybe you have a better understanding of this, Riley. Are they coming from the same clutch all the time? Is it different clutches each year? Like, how does that work?
It depends on the year and the quota that he's allowed to get. So if, earlier on, years ago when I was getting those groups from him of babies, and he would have like 20, maybe 30, those were coming from like 2 clutches, but it's generally 1 or 2. He would never have like excessive quantities beyond that from what I saw. And if he did, a lot of them were also subadults and adults. He works with, trappers and farms over there that will breed animals on their property. So years ago, he was bringing in entire clutches from those farms
Right.
So you and I got animals that are from the same clutch, most likely related for sure.
Right.
But then each year it's, it's a toss up. I don't know if he gets the information like, hey, these are offspring from the same babies or from the same parents as last year, or if the farm turns things over.
Right.
I'm not sure, but he's very particular about which farms he works with because he doesn't like the misrepresentation that goes on over there. He's made some videos in the past talking about how he's had to cut off certain business dealings with folks because he felt there were shady goings on, or they just weren't being honest with their representation, and he just doesn't want to dabble with that stuff, especially with his law enforcement background. I'm sure he'd just rather play it straight. So yeah, I mean, I think it really all comes down to how many they've got that year, and then what that year's quota is, and then all the hype about anything from Australia. Should have never left the country or whatever. Everybody got nervous about Australian stuff. I suspect some of that bled over a little bit into Papuan carpets because Dan wasn't bringing any in for a while, and he told me directly that they didn't want to touch anything carpet python related for a couple of years. So I don't know how much that played a role in it, but yeah, every year I think is different.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I kind of figured as much. If they had if it was a farm where they had a group or something there, that there would, and I would imagine that the demand is not that high for them.
Right. And if their trappers go out and find a gravid female, they'll bring her in, let her lay her eggs, and then let her go.
That will happen.
The babies and
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that happens with other pythons over there and for that, but okay. Yeah, I just think, I try to bang that drum that I hope Indonesia stays open for a while, but you never know. Things happen, the crazy way the world is. You never know what's going to change or what law will happen. So if you have an opportunity to sort of do something like that, or if you, like myself or Riley or Nick or other people that are working with, wild animals, it would be advantageous, I think, to add some of that fresh blood in, so down the line you can outcross certain things, and it's doesn't genetic bottleneck. I don't know, am I wrong there, Nick? Am I totally off base, or
no?
No. Okay.
I mean, as far as that gets into the topic of inbreeding related problems and all of that, which might get a little bit off topic, but Papuan carpets are one of the ones that it's pretty easy to not have that problem. That's you can argue how deleterious the effects of that are in other things for sure, but
sure,
carpet pythons, Papuan carpet pythons, you can get genetically diverse lines, and if you can, you should. So yeah, why wouldn't you? There's
yeah.
In some of these things, when you deal with a lot of the Australian stuff, you don't really have any choice. If you're going to breed jungle carpets, you're going to be breeding some really closely related animals out of necessity, because you can't not do that. You either do it or you don't breed jungle carpets. With Papuan carpets, you do have the ability to have totally unrelated lines, or minimally related lines and stuff. And in that case, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, I guess, that's a reptile fight club debate for another day, inbreeding and not. But, I guess what I'm saying is, if it's something that you're concerned with, right? If it's something that you're concerned with, here you have a subspecies of carpet python that it's not necessarily a concern at this point, and you could sort of get a group from various people across the U.S. to where you could get unrelated. Or
I would make a suggestion. I would like to see more people do basically what I've done and what other people are sort of to adopt now. And that is keeping close tabs on the ancestry of the animals you produce, their deep ancestry. If Indonesia were to just decided to close their doors and no longer allow export of native fauna, which could happen, frankly, at any minute. It's no one would even be surprised if that happened. What would the state of play be with our Indonesian carpet pythons? the overwhelming majority, people don't even know what they are. They don't know if they're pure or not, much less what they're related to, because people take for granted they can get them and it's not a problem. So they don't keep track of this stuff. If everybody kept track, good records on what they bred to what and where it all came from and all this sort of thing, you would have, you'd have a solid foundation for finding animals that are less related or outcrossed or what have you going forward in the event that happened. But if nobody keeps track of anything, it's all just, Papuan carpets and nobody knows any different.
Yeah.
Those look familiar.
Yeah. That was the first snake I bought from you, Nick.
From that weird wild caught female I got from Sean Christian a million years ago.
Yeah.
2000s. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. Kudos to you, Nick, for setting a good example in that, because I came into carpets naive to a lot of that and tripped over my own feet with some of that, and then picked myself up learning. And now I've maintained that, and I find just tons of value in being able to pull up folders on my computer and go back and look and see, who's related to who. You can see looks in certain animals that are recognizable, and I'd like to think that anybody moving forward who does even some attempt at keeping records in the style that you did, it could prevent a lot of problems for that group of snakes in the future. I spent the last 5-6 years just grabbing Papuans from all over, and I think I have a dozen different lines represented here, including farm hatched, wild caught, imported, everything that I could possibly get. And I have yet to repeat a pairing one year. Like, I could rotate males to different females for the next 15 years and never duplicate a pairing, with what I've got. And then I keep a pair from each pairing, and then I keep that documented, and each one has a certain look in mind, and being able to look back on all of that and see it all there, like right next to one another, is fascinating. And I think being able to preserve that for the future is invaluable.
Yeah. Early on, Nick influenced me with the lineage stuff, and I can't tell you, man. At first, the Morelia world, they were having, well, I should say the chondro world has done it forever, but carpet python world, they were like, no, that's not happening. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do it, and Nick's doing it, so we'll know.
Because nobody wants to do any extra work. Because this is lazy. It's like, we don't want to do any, don't be bothered. Weird thing is the chondro people kind of started it, but if you look at their pedigrees are all for hybrid snakes. All the snakes are hybrids. And and most of them didn't have any images in them. It's just like serial numbers for hybrid snakes. It's like, I guess you can trace the back, but it's like,
that's because they all turn green, Nick. There's no need for a picture.
What?
I'm not trying to fight with the chondro world. What about you, Ben? You're coming back new into it. Are you keeping up with lineage, or it doesn't matter to you, or what's your thoughts?
I definitely enjoy seeing it whenever I can find it. Nick is amazing at it. You can look through the years and years on his site and see all the different lineages. Yeah. But I was kind of disappointed whenever I got back into it that other people weren't doing it, because I don't know. I thought it was more of a thing. I remembered it. Maybe I was just making it up in my head. I thought it was more of a thing back in the day. But yeah, I was disappointed that I couldn't find that for other stuff, for jungles and, other stuff I was shopping for.
Yeah. And I think with Papuans too, the Papuan carpets, it's kind of like you can start it, especially if you're getting like, captive hatch or wild caught animals that like you kind of like, there's no question. Wasn't bred to a jag at some point to make granite jags, or, it wasn't that, it's like, if you look at the jungle stuff, there's always that one animal. It's like you find the stellar carpet, jungle, and you're like, yes. And you're going through, and, to some people it matters, some people it doesn't. But I think that with this group in particular, it's kind of, I think it's important because, 50 years from now, that subspecies could be, the one that can trace it all the way back to and I don't know. It's like, Nick, how do you feel about this? It's your life's work, right? I mean,
pretty much.
it's right there in a PDF, right? I mean, you can just look at it and say, wow,
Yeah, well, I've found that the sort of the tree, like the one you're, like you've got on the up on the screen right now, that is the most effective and simplest way to do it. When you make these, you don't have to start from scratch. You just keep adding to it and adding to it and adding to it over time. So it's the most efficient way, and it's got a visual representation with photographs and information, all that. So I found this to be the most effective way to do this. Every person I sell a snake to, I send them the raw file for the ancestor tree so they can edit it. So in theory, hopefully, and I've seen some people do it to greater or lesser degrees of success, where the idea is that you take this tree I just made for this snake or even this pair of snakes, and you don't need to make your own tree. You can just add more stuff. You can literally just add another row below of this is what you did, and you put this animal, and you can kind of just keep it going on down the line. I think that with carpet pythons more generally, and it's probably even more important with the Australian forms than it is with the Papuans, but it's relative there as well, this is not a group of snakes that you should probably just go buy some random snake. It's if you're serious at all, or you might even be serious, you can't just casually just go buy any old carpet python and figure it out. You'll never figure it out. You'll never know what it even is. You've got to kind of do a little bit of homework. It's really easy though. I mean, if you wanted to find a pure jungle carpet that, would satisfy, you as being pure, it wouldn't take you that long. It's not that hard to find. It's like, and with a Papuan carpet, it should be considerably easier to find. But if you just go buy some random snake from a flipper at an expo or something, you're never going to sort that mess out. So it is something I would, people, if you're thinking about getting into carpet pythons of any variety, Papuans or otherwise, like do a little bit of homework first, just a little bit, 10 minutes, you figure it out. It might take like 10 minutes. I'm tired. I mean, I can say, and I know every single one of you is going to agree with me because you've all no doubt had this experience, probably had this experience in the last 7 days. And that is the random person who contacts you to ask you questions about some snake they bought from somewhere else. Hey, it's like, I don't know you and you don't know me, and I never bought a snake from you, and I'm never going to buy a snake from you, and I don't even like you very much, but I would like you to tell me what this snake I bought from somebody else is. And it's like, no, and nobody can tell you. It's like, it's maddening, and it's like every couple of days I get these, and I know you're laughing, Eric, because I know you get it too.
All the time.
I know both of you guys, all three of you guys have had this experience. It's like you can't tell. It's like do a little bit of work, and this should be standard practice for buying any animal. You're buying a living thing. At least have some idea what you're doing before you buy a living animal.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, there's some on some Papuan carpets on Morph Market right now that I inquired about. I was like, hey, you got any pictures of the parents? Know where they came from? And just dead silence. No response at all.
Yeah. I think it separates the men from the boys, huh? I that's how I feel. It's like, if you want to do this for real, then do it for real. And to your point, Nick, it's like, stop being lazy and put the work in. Like, it takes, I don't know, what's it take? Depending. I mean, if you start with something like this, it takes 10 minutes to add the pairing in, I don't know. And if you want to see what they're talking about, you should definitely go to Inland Reptile and look at what does it say? Lineage. And then there's goes back to all the way, 2009, or does it go farther than that, Nick? I can't remember. We were just looking at your site.
Oh, there you go.
We were showing we were just showing some of the lineage stuff that you
Those
had.
aren't even the good ones.
Oh yeah, I know. Right? We go to
they're like the 2022. Some of the jungle ones are just ridiculous.
Here you go.
Huge. Yeah,
that's not even jungles, but yeah,
that's a coastal one, but that's a lot of ancestors.
Yeah, very cool. Let's see. Let's look at. I know you have one jungle here. It's probably like. Is that one at the? No, that's Carmel. Here you go. Look at that.
Yeah. Not
Yeah.
as many on the maternal side because the female is super old. She herself is from 2006. So she's, 18 years old at this point. So just a hop, skip, and a jump back to the original founder stock.
Right. Okay. Go back to my week.
Well, the mother of that snake is an import. So and the father I think is I can't read it without, I'm afraid to even touch my phone without.
Yeah. 2005 het male produced by.
Yeah. The one from 05. That is a very, very, very early het granite. They came over from a guy named Bard in the Netherlands who got it from Piet in or Bard is in Norway and Piet's in the Netherlands. And that was one of the very first het granites that made its way to the U.S.
Well, that's a perfect segue into what we'll talk about with morphs. So currently there is the granite morph, and for years it was there was some, well, not for years, but for years you've been outcrossing them because there were some issues with them in the early days.
With that snake on the screen.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because granite is recessive, it encourages like bad behavior, I guess, because people want to make money, don't they? And the fastest way to make a recessive is to breed brother, sister, father, daughter ad infinitum to make more granites.
Mm-hmm.
The original animals that it is my understanding that the original animals that produced the first granites were all captive hatched clutch mates. They got imported. They were undoubtedly siblings. Guy got a pair of them, bred them, granites popped out. But he started out by breeding brother, sister. And then he never outcrossed them ever, not once, just brother, sister, father, daughter, forever, the whole time, to make more granites as fast as possible. And by the time they got here, hadn't even been that many generations. It'd only been a handful of generations into this. But they were already having problems. The granites, the visual granites, were prone to RIs. They were just seemed a little bit weak. I had that pair of hets, and I never produced a viable granite from them. They would all die. A lot of the normals would die. I had a clutch as a cold trainer acts like 13, 14 babies, and ultimately 0 of them lived to be a year old. They all hatched, they all ate, but then they would stop eating and just wither away and die. The total mess. Around that same time, I'm sure you know Ben Morrill.
Mm-hmm.
Ben was doing his PhD stuff, and he was doing one of the things he was doing is he wanted to demonstrate the existence of monozygotic twinning in snakes. And I had in that clutch of messed up granites and possible hets and whatnot that weren't doing well, I had a set of identical twins that were obviously identical twins, but he wanted to prove it using, genomically. So I sent him, as part of that, I sent him samples of the parent animals and all the clutch mates of the twins. But at that point, there were only 6 of them. There were only 6 of the original 13 alive at that point. He took all of them and he proved that they were indeed monozygotic twins, which wasn't surprising. But one of the things that came out of that is they were unbelievably inbred. Mm-hmm. And I'll paraphrase a little bit, but this is basically a direct quote. He says he looked in like 5 places, and he said they were homozygous for 4 out of the 5 genes he looked at. He goes, it's evidence of extreme inbreeding issues. It's no wonder these things are having problems. That's what he said.
Okay.
And at that point, I started aggressively outcrossing them for years to get as far away from that original stuff. And wouldn't you know it, even within just a generation or 2, things got much better.
Right.
Oh, also in the original visual granites were not sterile, but were extremely reproductively challenged. They would virtually always slug out. Or you'd get like 3 eggs and 9 slugs, and 1 egg would hatch and 2 babies would die and the rest were done. So it'd be that kind of they were almost a waste of time. And then fast forward, years of outcrossing, and a lot of those problems of fertility issues and the overall weakness issues largely have gone away. And I have female granites that lay eggs all the time. it's not really, you don't really think about it so much anymore, but they were much more problematic in the early days.
Okay. I know, Ben, you work with the granite gene. What are you trying to do with it?
Yeah, so I have one male granite that's possible het for Xanthic also. There he is pictured. And then I have 100% het female and then 2 other possible het females. And basically with that group, 2 of the females are lighter colored, and I'm kind of hoping to move more in like a high orange granite kind of look. And then I've got more of like a high contrast female that I would want to kind of mix in there too. That will, if I can make granites out of that, then I will breed her into my high contrast group instead of back into the granite group.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I'm kind of going 2 different directions with granite, and then, everything's possible het for Xanthic. So I'm hoping to maybe get some Xanthic mixed in too.
Okay. I mean, so real quick on this, I have a thought, Nick. I don't know. Maybe I'm totally wrong, because I know Xanthic is taking away the yellow, right? I know it doesn't take it all the way away and whatever. Am I wrong with that? Probably.
One of these days, we should just do a really short, like 30-minute show, and you can title the show, "Everything Anyone Told You About Xanthic Is Wrong."
Okay.
Everything is wrong. Nothing that people believe about Xanthic, anything is right. A, none of them are actually Xanthic. B, it's not even recessive. It's like, it's an incomplete dominant hypoxanthism. That's what they are. They're not Xanthic.
Okay.
So, and it's not recessive. So it's but if you try to explain incomplete dominant hypoxanthism to people, their brain just starts to melt and they just look at you glassy eyed, and it's just, okay, but that's, it doesn't remove all the yellow pigment. You get a partial reduction of yellow pigment in the heterozygous form, and you get a much larger reduction in the homozygous form, but not a complete elimination, which is why snow carpets don't look totally white, do they? Where'd all that yellow come from? That's the remainder that it doesn't remove. If they were truly Xanthic, it would remove all of it, but it doesn't.
I think what my theory is, and I think about this with ball pythons. Whenever I would see a pastel Xanthic, it would pop, right? And it sort of went against everything that's wrong with the Xanthic. Throw it out of your mind, I guess now. So we'll have to do that episode at some point to get it for the record.
Ball pythons too. Their Xanthics aren't recessive and aren't Xanthics either. It's the same thing.
Right, but that pastel that was yellow and the Xanthic would sort of make that color instead of that base color. It's like what we see here in Ben's, just in the head there. When you saw that Xanthic grant, I mean, that's a freaking killer combination, in my opinion, as far as carpet morphs go. And it really just pops. And some of them seem to be, and I guess, seem to have more white to black, and others, some people, saturate their photos to make them super white. Some people actually have, high white, animals look. But I don't know. My thinking was always that if it had yellow like that it's going to make a nicer Xanthic in the long run, I guess is my thinking. Am I off there? Is that total bullshit? School me.
Well, the more yellow you have, the more that will be left over after the Xanthic gene does its job. However, I think a bigger thing that affects the phenotype of stuff like that is, all of you have noticed this, no doubt, that there are 2 different types of granites, in the sense that there's like 2, it's a gradient, and there's like 2 different extremes to it. You get the really contrasty high pattern ones that are really granity and it's really like bold. And then you get those other ones that is a much lower pattern, lower contrast. It's less busy, but they're both granites. And those 2 ends of the spectrum, and you don't get a lot in the middle. You get these 2 different looks. And that's going to look very different in an Xanthic. Those 2 forms are going to look very different from each other.
Right. Okay. I just don't have the science behind it, but yes, in a way that they're, and then I guess I think this is the other thing that I think, well, been talking about this for years, but like the idea that what you're breeding that animal to is going to make a difference on how those babies out, especially when you're talking morphs, right? I think that sometimes people just focus on, you know, I think of the original zebra that came in. It doesn't look anything like what the zebras you see today. No. It's like completely.
That's the thing. It's that people have accustomed themselves to this belief that's totally incorrect, that morphs are somehow endowed with magical powers, and that the mutant gene is the only thing that matters. It's the only thing that has an effect on anything, and it's absolutely not true. In a sense, all of these things are polygenic. Yes, the morph gene is doing what the broken gene is doing what it's doing. But what makes up the balance of the variation you see in most morphs, of the variation in appearance, is not variation in expression of the mutant gene. It's the expression of all the other genes the animal has that code for aspects of color and pattern. All those other genes get a say in the final outcome also. So you can selectively breed morphs. And I think carpet python people are more, because we're one of the few sectors of the hobby that hasn't totally abandoned selective breeding. We still do a lot of that. We still, you know, like if you look at, you know, the ball python people, it's easy to beat up on them. We all do it. It is because it's easy.
Poor
but
ball python people.
It does. It's the best thing to illustrate the phenomenon, and that is right. Like if you had an average Papuan carpet, and you had a really truly exceptional, like just awesome one. People will pay a lot more money for the awesome one. They will pay a premium for something that is exceptional. So selective breeding is rewarded because people will pay more money for better quality examples. Mm-hmm. If you contrast that with a morph only market like ball pythons, where no one cares about anything but the morph, they won't give you one extra nickel. You can have the greatest xanthic pastel clown that ever existed. Right. And you can have the most average mundane one, and no one will give you an extra nickel for the awesome one. All they care about is, does it have genes A, B, and C? And that is the only thing that matters. There's no premium. That selective breeding, the paying attention to the ingredients you put in there to make a better looking animal is not rewarded. It's just a collection of morphs. It's like they're ordering off an a la carte menu. And it's like, I want morph A, B, C, and D in this order. This is what I want, and this is what it costs. And that's just, you're ordering like a la carte. Right. The rest, these other factors are more nuanced that go into making something, you know, really pop or really a good quality example. It's not rewarded, but in carpets, thankfully, it still is. People will still, they've not forsaken that.
Right.
So they will pay. I mean, a lot of this stuff I sell, you know, a normal, I mean, at this point, to me, a zebra doesn't even command an extra $1 of premium. It's not like, yes, it's the it's a morph. But if you have a nice normal jungle that's better looking, it's like it doesn't really, you might want a zebra, you might not, but I'm not charging really any extra money for the fact that it's a zebra. It's how good of an example is this? Mm-hmm. That's what drives this thing. You can sell, you know, I have seen people I know have sold normal Papuan carpets for the same money as granites and even more, because if it's a really freaking good one, people will pay it. People want that quality, or what they perceive as quality. And I think that's a good thing.
100%. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Riley?
I totally agree. I will pay double or even triple if there's the option for quality over just a base example. I mean, yeah, night and day. It's no question about it. And I think the ball python people miss an opportunity with that, because there are better examples of those morphs out there, and they could start with that and build off of those better quality ones and take the same enthusiasm with their Frankenstein approach and just make a better version of it if they cared. Yeah. It's fun, man. I like breeding the selective stuff and the different looks. There's just no end to it. And then to take each one the next second and third and fourth step is just, you have no idea what's coming next, but it's like nobody else is doing it. So it's super exciting and it's super rewarding. And then, you know, when you project that, people get excited about it in the same way. And so it's a contagious thing. And I love that people are still holding on to that.
Yeah. I think too, the thing with carpets, it's probably with nah, maybe not with ball python. I'm not really sure. I can't speak on that, but carpets seem to have a lot of variability in a clutch. Coastals in particular, like they pop out. Just every clutch has a crazy one in it, and you're just like, where the hell did this thing come from? What? Like, holy shit! I just remember the old MP days, and it would be like, somebody would post up that picture of that wild one from the clutch, and everybody's like, what the hell is that? Holy shit, and maybe it's because we really didn't have morphs back in the day, I guess. I don't know, but like, I think that there was that appreciation for just that crazy one that popped out, and then you got the color change that they go through, and it's like you don't even really like, once they're hatched, you still have to wait. You're waiting and you're waiting. You're like, damn it, I know this is going to be a nice one, or sometimes the one you don't think is going to be a nice one, you go and sell, like that one you showed earlier, Riley. You're like, why the hell did I get rid of this one? And
yeah, there's two that this season that have taught me that, and the jungle folks have it figured out. You hold on to a trophy clutch for a year or so, you know what they're doing. I thought I had that clutch figured out after a few months. I was like, oh, all right, let some of these folks get some, and then they started shedding out, and they already have like the paid or the spoken for tags on them. And bitch, I shouldn't have done that. And I look at my hold back. I'm like, would he note it? Oh yeah, damn it, I can't do that. That would be so mean. Well, I guess that I gotta make some folks happy.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's free advertising too, right? You get your name on and out, like Riley's
Reptiles produced
this, or Ben produced this, or Nick produced that, whatever, So
they give you updates later on, and it's very humbling. It's really cool to see.
Yeah, 100%.
You ever find yourself trying to buy back a snake you sold to somebody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Done that a few times. Always for way more than they paid me for it initially.
Yeah. It always seems that way, right? I was going to show this crazy one, you just talk about it. Unfortunately, I was so excited about this. It was from the Tiger IJ clutch. And as soon as it hatched out, you can see in that picture in the bottom, I was like, this one is cool. And it shed like 3 times, and then it just rolled on me, and I was so bummed out about it. But that's just part of it, right? That's the thing that people don't talk about. And, it's always rainbows and unicorns when really it's not the case. But, I don't know. To me, that just screams that, like, that patched out. And it's like, oh shit. I think I sent a picture to Nick, and he's like, can I have that one? And I was like, no. I'm on like year 12 of waiting for some of your melanistic Papuan stuff. 12 years later, or some lightning line jungles. Either one of those things, I've been after you for.
Yeah, that makes 2 of us, Nick.
Yeah.
I got seniority on this. I've been after this.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I held on to everything, sort of like what Riley was saying, but maybe it's time to start sending some of that stuff out. I was going to talk about this real quick, Nick. We talked about it before the show started, but I'm looking for this crazy thing, the crazy albino stuff that hatch outs the Tiger IJ stuff.
Okay, so there was a guy in the United States that had animals that were about a year older from the same parents, as I recall, as the one you had on that chart you showed.
Mm-hmm.
I think his were from 2004 from the same parents. And they produced a couple of these T-positive animals domestically. They hatched out, they shed, they seemed fine, but they would not eat for anything. The guy got all the rest of the clutch eating, and he was just adamant that he was going to get them to eat, and they were going to eat mice, and it was all going to be great. And I begged and I pleaded with him, it's not going to be all right. It's not going to work out. You're not going to succeed. Just send me the freaking snakes before they die. And then one of them died. I'm like, for the love of God, send me the remaining snake, please. It's like, it's not going to, he just is just absolutely just, this eternal optimist that was, man, they're just going to eat this mouse at some point. It's like, they're never going to eat it. You offer it a bird, you go buy it a friggin' leopard gecko. I don't care, whatever it wants. You give it whatever it wants. You don't let it starve.
Right.
So as you can probably surmise, guess what?
It starved.
It didn't eat. And it died. Those are the only ones there may be one other one that a notable East Coast carpet guy whose name I also won't mention. I never saw pictures of it, but from what was talked about kind of in a hush-hush manner, it seemed to imply, my guess is that the same thing popped out again, and also not lasting a particularly long time.
Correct.
So it does seem that whatever causes this it's not healthy for the snake. And that's why there's never gone anywhere.
So we were kind of talking a minute ago when your phone kicked out, but it was sort of saying like, I wonder, if this would even be good to have an animal like this, what it would look like or whatever, if it did, grow up, and, you're able to breed it and produce it and reproduce it. What do you think? So we started talking, I think it was Ben that said, the colors of a Papuan carpet would really make that pop. We kind of see that with Darwin's, I guess. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that as far as like, I mean, I know it's all just speculation, right? We don't know, but like, what do you think would happen with an adult that would look like that?
If it was a T positive albino, it would probably be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Which allows for deeper, richer tones. If it was a T negative albino, it would just end up looking like an albino Darwin. There's not that much difference. You strip away all the melanin and you end up with some orangey albino. These looked notably different than albino Darwins do at hatching, although, and they don't seem to have for as almost uniformly red as Papuan carpets are, these things all hatched out like this with bold contrasting pattern. Whereas you've hatched out albino Darwin stuff, it's usually just like a patternless pink worm for a long time.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Wait till you now go and selectively breed yourself some pure Darwin albino tigers that are striped from head to tail. They really look like crap when they're babies. For as good as they look later, like you're basically a year before you can actually see the striping, other than with a black light or something. But these looked weirdly different in that they had a contrasting pattern and didn't have that overall wash of pink. So it's just one of those. I think people in the hobby would be a little surprised at all the morphs of things that have existed that never got established.
Yeah.
That died and never, I mean, the 3 piebald emerald tree boas that were born to a gravid wild caught in the United States, all of which died. And they were pied like a ball python, like crazy pied emerald tree boas.
Oh, wow.
There have been pied annulated tree boas, didn't get established. There's been any number of, there was a legit hypomelanistic or T positive jungle carpet. I knew the guy that produced it many years ago. It was basically purple.
Wow.
Didn't make it in the longer run. There have been all manner of Dumerals boas and things that were hypomelanistic or T positive that never seemed to last. I hatched what appeared to be a T positive albino Brisbane coastal that was weird and lived for a couple of years, but it was never quite right. And it sadly passed on. I hatched a granite something a couple seasons ago that it never was quite right, but it was obviously like some crazy thing. It had like 3 speckles on the whole snake. It was mostly patternless. It was really, really bizarre, but
wow.
A lot of that stuff you never gets to the finish line, so you never get to see, what it would have turned into had it made it. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff.
This so when we were talking too, the other thing that we brought up was the color change that happens with Papuans. Like you'll go into your snake room in the daytime, you have one snake, you come back in the evening, and you see a totally different snake. I seem to think that maybe that happens because of like they're trying to hide from a predator or something, or maybe it has to do with temperature regulate. I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on what's going on with that color change? You know what I'm talking about, where it gets the lavender like look?
It's strange in that the obvious thing you would suspect would be it would aid in thermal regulation. The more dark you are, the more heat you absorb, and the lighter you are, you repel that heat. But behaviorally, it seems the opposite in that they tend to be lighter at night and darker during the day. You'd expect if it was a role in thermal regulation, it would go the opposite direction. But whatever it is, you see it in other, Papuan carpets seem to be able to do it to a greater extent than pretty much all the other carpet pythons. I mean, but among scrub pythons, you'll see the Halmahera python can do it like
Yeah.
way more than the others. Why? And it's usually the same sort of a thing. So that's an area somebody should write a paper on that. Somebody should study that more in depthly, because I'd be very curious to know the real reasons why what the advantage of that is.
I think on one of our field herping trips, we were talking about, tigers, and that I think that, what is it? Is it access deer that they eat in India or whatever? It doesn't matter. But anyway, these deer they only see everything as orange. So they sort of just like disappear, So my thought was, is there some kind of predator prey type of relationship that they have that like that color change sort of hides them from whatever that predator would be. But who knows? I don't know. But yeah, I think you're right. Somebody's got to write a paper on it. Chop, chop, Daniel Natouche.
There you
go. Okay. All right. What else do we got? Let's talk about some of your projects. Let's give Ben talk about some of the breeding projects that he has going on, and we'll pull some of it up. Like, what's your main project you got, Ben, that you're excited about?
Well, I think the thing I'm most excited about is the high contrast Papuan carpets. I have a pair from I'm blanking on it.
Mike Cross.
Mike Cross, yes.
Yeah.
Have a pair from him, and he started with wild caught, and these are F3s.
Okay.
So they are. Sorry, my dog's barking. They're F3s from his line, just breeding back with his. I think he started with a group of 6, and he's kind of breeding towards this high contrast look. The picture you're showing right there or the group of pictures you're showing right there is actually the same animal, just in his different color phases, like we were just talking about. He can go like really purple, or he can go like, he looks like a jungle, almost yellow and black, then everything in between. As he's gotten older, he's kind of lost some. He's more of your typical, tans and oranges, but he's still a really stellar animal. So I have a female that goes with him, and then I also got a female from Nick that is from a good long lineage, real high contrast, lots of orange. So that trio works together. And then this one is the high contrast possible double het xanthic and granite. And this is one that kind of floats between the two projects. This is one that I want to breed with the high contrast animals, but I also want to breed with my granite male and kind of see what direction I could go with like high contrast granites, high contrast xanthic.
Gotcha. And are they?
And then these are kind of like. I'm sorry. What?
No. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
These are kind of like the high orange. These are both possible double hets, xanthic and granite. And the kind of want to see high orange granite. And then if I get xanthic granite mixed in, I think really like xanthic granite would be really cool too.
Oh, heck yeah. Okay. How about you, Riley? What are some of is some of your most exciting stuff? Let's see. I think we got.
I have a lot of different directions in the Papuan groups that I have. So the animal on the left there is Redman, and he produces a lot of really high colored stuff when paired with females that even have like a decent amount of orange. And then the animal to the right is actually his father.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
Yeah. Who was an imported animal that I got as a little baby from Dan years ago. And he's been a stud. And he throws everything from like heavy black animals to animals that throw lots of nice oranges, like in Redman. And Redman was a standout as a baby. He kept his neonatal red, multiple sheds in better than the rest. And he seems to pass that on quite nicely in his offspring. So I have a vein of high colored stuff that's just trying to see how orange I can get things. And then I have some stuff where I'm just trying to get them as black as possible. Those are a couple babies from this year. The one on the left is a Redman offspring and
nice.
not a holdback. I just sold him actually.
Too late, people.
And the one on the right was from his father, who still produces amazing animals. And I just get so many different looks. I've kind of had a fondness for stripe stuff. So a lot of my animals have some level of striping and then it carries on.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So the top left one there is that's actually a female produced by Emily Stoddard, although that's her maiden name. I think her married name now is Emily Dubois, but I got a pair of really dark animals from her and they just produce amazing stuff. The animal on the bottom is actually a female that's related or a sibling to Redman. And then the top right animal was an animal that produced some high orange animals for me 2 seasons ago. She got egg bound, so I only got 4 good eggs out of that. But yeah, I get looks that cover the spectrum, and I don't even think I have all of the different looks covered. I've seen stuff in Nick's collection that's for sale that's like completely different than what I have. I see stuff that you have that's completely different from what I have.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different looks that you can go for sure. Are these older or younger animals?
These are all a couple of years old. The one on the left is that's that male tiger IJ line animal you sent me years ago.
Oh, okay.
And then the one on the right is a female from the same clutch as Redman. So
gotcha.
Just totally different look. Yeah, she was dark, super dark her whole life, and then all of a sudden just kind of has these subtle oranges coming in nicely. So
is the orange and red like where you're, I mean, I know you're doing a variety of stuff, but is that like where your main focus is at?
Yeah, I would say so. I'd like to see how much of in that angle, in that vein, how much of the black I can push out and how far up dorsally, because it tends to be more colorful caudally as opposed to cranially, but you tend to get more of a fade where it's darker closer to the head, and I want to see how far I can push it up dorsally and cranially and see if I can just make like a completely orange and buckskin, like no black animal sort of kind of look.
Yeah,
as far as that goes. So.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. Okay, cool. And then we'll hit on Nick. What's going on with these?
I think she's gravid, but
I know 3 people that want to get on the list of that clutch.
I gotta make good eggs first.
What the hell are those?
First time for that.
Yes,
male. Female produced some stuff for me last couple seasons, but we'll see. I don't hold my breath until I get eggs in the ground usually, but I didn't. I was anticipating the market just generally being really down this year, so I kind of and it certainly looked like it was going to be that way. So at the beginning of every breeding season, I look at like, what do I have on the shelf? Basically, what do I have? Because I don't want to overproduce anything. And what do I kind of think the market's going to be? And I try to make a prediction, and I'm usually wrong. And I was spectacularly wrong. So I paired very few snakes, for me anyway, much fewer than I normally would. So I'm not going to be kind of light on Papuan carpet stuff this year. And then, of course, once I decide and lock down what I'm doing for the year, then everything starts selling like crazy. And so now I might end up kind of with a dearth. I'm really, I'm not making a lot of double head xanthic granite stuff. I made a fair number of those this past year. So I'm breeding my females and making wild types. So I could put a xanthic granite double visual male on that female like I did last year, but nope, going with the normal because
Nice.
That's what I want to do. So
nice.
I've got 2 clutches coming from that particular male. We'll see if they're good eggs. It's too early to tell. I breed everything really late, but
Gotcha.
yeah, there'll be a clutch of xanthic granites with another female, but not a lot of morph stuff this year. Mostly wild types.
Gotcha. Okay. Ben, are you breeding this season? You're not breeding this season, right?
No carpets. No carpets.
No carpets. Gotcha. Antaresia, right?
Yeah, I got some children's pythons coming.
Gotcha. Okay. As for me, I mean, everybody knows my one project that they were talking about earlier, obviously, is the poison ivy. I figured there's her. And I put up a picture of her parents. They were wild animals. They actually came from Jake Milbrat, is sort of who did that. I think the female that's on the left is much darker, but I do have a female that is that I got from Ish this past year. That's pretty dark, and I'm gonna put a male. Hopefully she goes. I don't know. Put a male with her and see what happens with that. The weird thing about this, people have heard me talk about this before, is and Jake shared the same experiences, is why he got rid of it. That they hatch out normal, and as they age, they get darker and darker and darker, and they don't go completely black because she still has like the white on the labial scales, which I kind of like because it kind of looks like a skull face almost. I kind of like that look, so I'm kind of glad that it's not completely black. But that's that one. I think I got a banded project from this girl. She's an F3. And she produced some crazy looking, I don't know if I put a picture of it in here. No. But anyway, it was, nope, never mind. And then, so I got the banded project that I'm doing. And then, I have this high yellow type of contrast with the orange flames on the side. That's a look that I like. I have a lot of animals that look like that. Especially with that yellow head. And then the other thing that I particularly like is the striped stuff. There's one of the tiger eye J babies from the same clutch that Riley's talking about. But like, I see a few people working with striped stuff, but for whatever reason, I don't know. There's not, I think Riley, you got a great group of striped stuff. I'm sure you do, Nick, tucked away somewhere. The stuff you don't talk about. Here's another wild caught animal that I have. That's stripe. I like that pinstripe type of look. With the small saddles on the side. So, a couple different directions you could go with that stuff, and then obviously high contrast with that. I to me, I love how the saddles kind of had that orange chestnut brown type of look, and then it's outlined very, very, just a little bit in black, and with that khaki color, base color, I guess. Yeah, that's kind of, I think that's my, and then, that's that crazy one that died. And then I have, this is that K2 Eddie stuff that I had for a while. And for whatever reason, it has this weird look to it. Nick, you have some of this stuff too. I know you got it from somebody a while back, but that all came from Luke Snell, which is probably the guy that really steered me in a direction of Papuan carpets with some of the stuff that he was working with. But yeah, that's kind of like where my head's at. I like the orange. I didn't include it, but I have one from that banded girl where the orange is just super intense on it. Yeah, I don't know. That's sort of my projects. And what else have we got on the list to talk about? I don't know. I thought we'd maybe talk about like some of the history of some of the stuff. People talk about poster child. They see the name's PC. That's sort of what that was. Spitfire was a big one back in the day. That's Yasser. I think he breeds colubrids now, right? He's a colubrid guy.
Only weird colubrids. He breeds like obscure, weird localities of obscure snakes. It's awesome.
Right.
Just like the craziest oddball stuff, which I think that's commendable.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. It's funny when I first started going to the forums and sort of like being introduced to like you and Yasser and Sean Christian and Justin and all the carpet guys. I remember I would just read the post between you and Yasser and like just like soaking it up like a sponge, just like, oh, this is the great. It was every night I would come home and it's so different time from back in the day. And this is sort of what I wanted to talk about and get your guys' thoughts on it. But it wasn't like you could just look at your phone and see what's happening on the forum. You had to wait until the end of the night when you got home from work or whatever. And you instead of watching TV, you go onto the forum and you're watching everybody talk about their carpet pythons. And is this pure? Is the Jag have neuro? Is the tiger? That's the, all that stuff that I don't know. I kind of like that. I guess we'll start with you, Nick, cause you're my age. What was it like back then? What do you see is better, or what do you see is
that in many ways it was better? I personally wasn't better. I was not as well behaved as I am now. I was younger and, rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Maybe I still do, probably, but I hope I'm better now than I was then. And
oh no, yeah.
Back in my younger days, I was very combative and I just had a chip on my shoulder and I was always trying to prove to everybody how smart I was about everything. And that manifested in me being an asshole, frankly, a lot of times. And I got in a lot of big arguments with Yasser. We were friends and then we kind of fell out and then we were like weird mortal enemies for a long time there over just over what, like egos and stupid arguments about carpet pythons, like in hybrids. Like it was just, I don't look back at my own behavior and the way I comported myself very fondly back in those days. Right. I'm glad Yasser's back in the hobby. I've talked to him a few times. He's a good guy. I definitely meant how I behaved. I mean, he was busting balls too, for sure. But I mean, I recognize my own sort of like immaturity back in those years. That was 20 years ago, but I think as a vehicle for disseminating information, the old forum days were better. Social media, it's there and then it's gone. And 3 days later, you can't even find it. You can't go back and find that stuff later. So as far as being a repository for knowledge, I think it was a better system.
Yeah.
I do need to mention, Eric, I need to get going here in about 15, 20 minutes. I got to play with my pool league. And it's a considerable drive, so I do have to get going. So if there's anything you wanted to ask me or anything before, just keep that in the back of your mind. I know you want to talk about the Nova thing or whatever, but
sure. Okay. What we'll do is we'll do the Nova thing. And then after that, me, you, and Ben will hit that question that we just hit. Does that sound good? About, just the forum or whatever, and that kind of thing. Let's go into that. So this would be the Patreon
totally
thing.
Disrupted the outline now.
Oh, God damn it, Nick.
Okay.
That's what editing is for.
About 2000, geez, this is, you think about the dates associated with things, and it reminds you how old you're getting.
Yeah, no kidding, man. I know.
That animal, I got that snake as a baby in 2007. Like,
holy shit.
Yeah, so we're 17 years on now. That's 2007, and I got his little tiny baby. Weighed about 30 grams. The Nova Guineas. What the heck are these things? They've always been kind of an enigma. There was a story attached to them, like there always is, but it was odd that basically the story was that they were from Papua New Guinea, the PNG side of the island. That was not backed up by anything. They are weird looking. They are different. They don't look like other Papuan carpets. They're not even that red of babies. They have a weird head structure with an elongated snout and upturned rostral region. You don't see that on any of the other ones. They lay larger clutches of slightly smaller eggs. So they're kind of odd. What are these things? Lots of speculation. The original guy that had them, there is a CITES document paper trail with those, but it's there's a time in the European Union when you still needed CITES documents to go from country to country, and there's old CITES documents, and you had to list the country of origin on those old paperworks, and it was listed as Nova Guinea, which is, New Guinea. If they were from Indonesia, you'd say Indonesia, not New Guinea. But other than that name appearing listed as a country of origin, that's really it. And so they were always kind of an enigma. I brought those animals, the first ones in. I brought in 4.2. That's all I could get. At the time, they were calling them poor man's Jags, which is funny because now they're worth considerably more than Jag, but because they kind of had that reduced pattern look to them. And I thought this will be easy. I'll get the snakes because I can, and it'll be easy for me to figure out the background story of these things because everybody's still alive. Usually you hit the wall when somebody's passed away and you can't ask somebody questions because they literally died. In this case, everybody was still alive, still is to this day, is my knowledge. But a couple of these people were just had gotten out of the hobby entirely and are not interested in answering the phone or answering questions about snakes, and they're just unavailable to answer any questions about anything. So I was never able to really put that one to bed. I bred them a few times, and then I sold the project off because I didn't know what they were. And so fast forward several years go by, I no longer have any of these anymore. Right. And before I parted with the last of them, I took skin samples or shed skins because we were in the run up to doing the second edition of the book. And basically, I can report what these things actually are. I had Warren Booth, when he ran all the DNA work for the new book and did that phylogenetic tree based on all these samples. Everything keyed out basically just like it was supposed to based on the most recent work done with Australian specimens in 2014 and 15. The Palmersons were consistent with what they are. Everything was consistent with what it was supposed to be. I also, not included in the book, I had him run the DNA of the Nova Guineas for my own personal, because I don't have a location associated with them. I did not include that. We pruned it out of the tree. But in that batch, I have their genetic information, so to speak. And they are completely consistent with being from New Guinea. All the other speculation about all the other things they might be, some kind of coastal or whatever, turns out, no, there is, as weird looking as they are and as phenotypically different as they are, there is no daylight between them and a normal Papuan carpet at all. So you can, the story has always been they're from New Guinea, and the DNA suggests that that's actually true. And I've been sitting on that little nugget for 4 years. So there you go.
How's it feel to share?
Finally shared it. So yeah,
nice.
There were a couple other little, when I had Warren run all that stuff, it's this is what I need for the book to generate a phylogenetic tree for these things. But there were a couple specimens of things of interest that I had him run at the same time. This is one of them, to answer a couple of these sort of long-standing questions and areas of doubt. So I think we can put this one to bed now. They're Papuan carpets of a different flavor. Why they look the way they look is an open question, and you really can't answer that without speculation. Early on in the doing as much background research on this group of snakes as I possibly could. And at the time I can't remember the guy's name. There was a guy in the UK that was also simultaneously obsessed with figuring it out. So we were kind of working in tandem, and there was some suggestion that this population that the founder animals did in fact come from PNG, from an area called the Morehead district of PNG, which sounds more exotic than it is because it's literally just over the other side of the border. It doesn't explain why they're so weird, because that contiguous area of eucalypt savanna where the carpets occur, 3/4 of it's on the Indonesian side, but a little bit of it's on the Papua side. And it's just that area. It's it literally, it doesn't explain why, if they were from there, it doesn't explain why they're odd. But genetically, they are one and the same. So I think we can put that one to bed.
Wow. So I'll throw this little tidbit out. You go to iHerp. It's not I, is it? No, iNaturalist. Sorry. iHerp. Wow, that's a blast from the past. iNaturalist has you can go on there and kind of look at the sightings of Papuan carpets. And oddly enough, on the side that you're talking about, Nick, one of the ones kind of has a grayish type of look like those. I don't know if you've ever seen that. I don't know if you looked into that when, you know, I'll send you a picture of it. I'll send you guys a picture of it, and, you know, you can sort of look at it. I know it doesn't prove anything, but I don't know, just a little interesting tidbit to add. There's only one sighting from that side, which is odd.
When you look for pictures of wild carpets in Papua, you almost always find ones from around Port Moresby, which is quite a distance away, and it's a largely disjunct population. You rarely find pictures of wild ones from the Indo side or the Papua side near that border. It's almost always in what's called, I think it's Central Province.
Right. Yeah.
You don't usually find ones from that area.
Okay. Let me mark this real quick.
Now I want to see the picture of the one on iNaturalist.
I'll send it in our group message.
There you go.
I've got it pulled up right now.
Do you?
Yeah, it's pretty. It's grainy. It's hard to see, but yeah, I'll see if I can send it to you, Nick.
Real quick, I guess it's closing, and then this will be all out of order, so we'll have to go back and I'll fix it. No worries. I guess it's closing. Maybe we'll start with you, Nick. Like, you know, what do you got to say to the people about, you know, Papuan carpets, if they're sleeping on them or they're interested in them, or, you know, closing thoughts?
I think they're probably one of the absolute best projects you could get into in terms of carpet python species for a few reasons. I wouldn't go so far as say, you know, unlimited, untapped potential, but they've got a fair bit of potential for selective breeding that's not been. I mean, you can pick any metric and you can steer carpet pythons towards that goal. They're very phenotypically plastic in that way. And there's just not a lot of people, if you wanted to make really super stripy ones, you could do that. If you wanted to make super banded ones, you could do that. If you want to make them light, you can do that. If you want to make them dark, you can do that. My advice is pick a single thing and go with that. It's almost impossible, and I've tried. You can't really selectively breed for color and pattern at the same time. You can get one, you won't get both. Pick a single thing and go for that. And pattern is generally easier to selectively steer for than color is, because pattern is apparent at hatching and color develops over time. But there's this world of possibilities that not many people are dealing with. It's also the carpet that has the greatest amount of genetic diversity, and that's not a huge problem. So you don't have those, to the extent that those are issues at all, you don't really have that concern with them. So another one in the plus column, they tend to be one of the mellower carpet pythons. Again, a total plus. They are without question the easiest carpet python to breed. They are so easy to breed, you can breed them almost on accident. They're that easy. Because they're the most equatorial of all the carpet pythons, they need the least amount of environmental stimulus to induce fertile mating. So they're just super easy to breed. And I don't know why, but the babies I find to be really easy they're the easiest babies to get feeding. So it's just all across the board. You got a lot of projects you can do, a lot of wiggle room, a lot of room to get creative with what you pair and what you do. You have genetic diversity you don't have in any other carpet. They're super easy to breed, and the babies eat. So it's like, what more could you ask for? Really?
Mic drop. Yeah, 100%. All right. Ben, what's your thoughts? Or Riley, go ahead. I saw you unmuted your mic, so you go.
I mean, I definitely am one of those people who needs like the entire set of Morelia as far as that's concerned.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to lie to myself, and I'm not going to lie to the audience. But that being said, it's really difficult to pick a favorite, but they're probably my favorite group to work with. The most satisfying as far as instant gratification and long-term potential, and just kind of, just there's endless potential in my mind as far as what I can play with. And then, I can dabble with some exanic stuff and some granite stuff on the side, and kind of still scratch that itch of having it all. And I'm really excited for the future of Papuan carpets, whether or not they shut down the ability for us to get imports or not, remains to be seen. But I think people should just be grabbing them up left and right. They're the best. I mean, not too big, not too small, really easy to keep, really easy to breed, great temperaments, other than my babies, apparently. And yeah, they're awesome snakes, and there's so much color palette and variety in there. And yeah, you can't explain like the firing up and firing down thing until you've really experienced it. It's pretty special. So yeah, I love them.
Okay, cool. Ben?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of piggyback on what you guys said, but like there's so many different looks. You could go in any direction that you want. Like there's more looks than we showed tonight. We showed all these different variations, and there's more than what we've kind of looked at tonight. And you can just kind of pick one thing and steer it in that direction. Another thing we didn't even talk about is the red babies. The ontogenic color change that they go through is really cool to watch. And it's different than some of the other carpets, going from that red baby or kind of coppery color to yellow or brown, or, it's just a really cool process to watch. And then, yeah, the flaming up and down with the different colors that come through in that, and having a different snake at different times of day it's really cool to watch. So, yeah, I keep quite a few different carpets, but they're the ones that I enjoy, checking on the most, because every time you look at them, it's something different.
No, I was going to say that now I lost my train of thought. Never mind. We'll just end it right there, and we'll call it. I appreciate you guys coming and, doing the roundtable and whatnot. And as if people don't know, let's throw out your information. Riley, how do people get in touch with you?
I'm pretty easy to find. Riley's Reptiles on Instagram, Riley Jimison on YouTube and Patreon and everything else. So pretty easy to find. Riley'sReptiles.com.
There you go. Ben?
Ben Nickelson on Facebook and Nickelson Herpetoculture on Instagram.
Okay, cool. And Nick?
I'm just Nick Mutton. InlandReptile.com is my website. I have a business page on Facebook and my personal page. It's all kind of intermingled these days. I'm generally pretty easy to find. So
yeah. I would say that if the listeners out there are interested in getting into Papuan carpets, these gentlemen right here, I know Ben's not breeding yet, but he will very soon in the future. But have a great group, produce great animals. I know firsthand. I don't know from you, Ben, but I can vouch that it'll be good. Yeah. So if you're looking, if we converted you, then you should go check these guys out and see what they got going on. All right. And that's all we got. So see, it's so weird without Owen saying, thank you for listening. Good night. See, he had to sit this one out because he hasn't been able to breed Papuan carpets yet. So,
We'll see. He still hasn't?
No, he still hasn't.
They're the easiest one. That's the easiest one.
It hurts his soul that he's bred white lips and mad hogs and all these crazy species that he's bred, and yet he's bred roughies, but Papuan carpets seem to
oh geez, it's like that's crazy.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
So, hopefully listen to the end. But I bet he didn't. So
you better.
All right, Nick, I know you got to jump off and go and whatnot, so I appreciate you coming on and hanging. Glad to do it again.
Fun as always, guys.
Yeah. All right.
Must have.